Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Icon. Thank you so much for checking out another episode of Competitive Call of Duty Talk. In today's episode, I want to touch on three main topics that I feel are really bright spots right now in terms of the Call of Duty League, or topics that are really seem to be getting a lot of traction on social media and Twitter and like CDL intel, stuff like that. There are a few topics that really seem to be getting some heat recently. So those three topics are: first of all, I want to talk about Domination being replaced. Right now, there's a little bit of a discussion in terms of how Domination plays in this game, and will it be replaced or should it be replaced? And if so, what should it be replaced with? Next, we'll talk about an updated power rankings heading into Seattle. And then speaking of Seattle, we'll go ahead and we'll lay out who I believe the favorites are. We'll take a look at the bracket, kind of see how it works out, and then we'll move on from there. So with that, let's go ahead, let's hop right into this. So with that being said, I'm going to bring up this map right here, and this is just Gunrunner, okay? So this is just the domination points on Gunrunner here. And first, let's talk about the strategy that's at play whenever you're playing Gunrunner. So most people know that if you have this A side spawn, then you're going to have the beneficial spawn, at least for the first half of Domination. If you get this spawn over here, things probably aren't going to go your way. Again, also in the first half. Now let's talk about why a little bit. So if you go ahead and you capture A and you capture B, then this is the ideal setup, right? So in most scenarios, you want to have A and B. Almost all scenarios, you want to have A and B. And the reason being is that, say you get your enemy spawning out over here towards C. And that's the end goal, right? So even though they're going to spawn here to begin with, you really do want them spawning on that top side of the map. So the way that you can force that is, say you have a people up here, a couple people watching kind of these two lanes pushing into B. Maybe you have somebody mid-map. And the ideal scenario here is that you also have somebody pushed up and they're just flirting around with C, right? So they'll hop on it, they'll neutral it, they'll run away. As soon as somebody comes to cap it, then they'll try to get those kills and then neutral it and then run away. So the reason why this works is because if you have somebody in this C area, and again, you don't even have to have it captured, but if you have somebody close up there, that is what makes the enemy team spawn over on the top side of the map. So they would be spawning over here, and now they're kind of stuck, right? So you go ahead and you push C, and hopefully you can get C. And then after you get C, you're so far back on the right side of the map. What do you do from there? Do you try to push through one of these small chokes into B? Do you try to go mid-map and then go through pipes and get to B? Or the best case scenario is that after you capture C, you're able to push through woods and then get all the way into warehouse in this P5 spawn, and then you can capture A, and then if you capture A, then you can go ahead and push B, and you can capture B, and now all of a sudden you can hold these and push up to C and spawn the enemy team out on the top side of the map, right? So basically, in the last 2 minutes there, we just talked about all of the strategies for Gunrunner Domination. And that's the reason why I don't really enjoy breaking down Domination. I don't really enjoy watching Domination, because the entire time it is just a battle for that one strategy. So if you're the team that's not spawning on A, if you're the team that's spawning here, then of course you're going to cap C to begin with, but then you'll send a lot of people over towards A, hoping that you can go ahead and capture A and then push into B and capture B, set up this spawn trap and get your enemies spawned on the top side of the map. Or if you're the team that does spawn on A, so if you're the team that spawns here, you want to capture A, you want to move into B, you want to push out, you want to hold this and then push out and try to flirt with C and get the enemy spawning on the top side of the map. The entire time, that is the strategy for Domination on Gunrunner. So that's just kind of the reason why I don't love to watch it and I don't love to break it down, because the whole time, if you're breaking down a 10-minute match, you're basically just explaining how close one team is or the other team is to executing that strategy. So what do I think would be better? Okay, so let's talk about, if we weren't playing this, what would be best? In my personal opinion, and I know that there are a lot of discussions out there, there are a lot of pros saying it doesn't really work with 5v5 or it doesn't work in this game or whatever, but in my opinion, Capture the Flag by far is the best game mode. Now, there have been some others in the past, like Uplink. Remember Uplink, remember Blitz and Call of Duty Ghosts. Those were good. Even last year when we had Control was a really fun game mode to watch with the limited number of lives and the 2 sites and stuff like that. But for me, when it comes to strategy, I really enjoy Capture the Flag. And let's talk about why. So let's say one flag is over here inside of P2, and we'll say the other flag is over here inside of P5, okay? So one team is going to spawn here, the other team is going to spawn on this side of the map. Now, when it comes to Capture the Flag, this is all about, everything with Capture the Flag is all about routes, right? And cutting off certain routes or securing certain routes so that you can exit through there. So let's say we're playing Capture the Flag, you send people up mid, you're trying to gain an advantage in one of these 3 routes, and let's say you get a stronghold on the bottom side of the map. So if you get over here, let's say we get here, and we know this from Hardpoint, that immediately is going to send the enemy team up here towards B to spawn, right? They're not going to continue to spawn behind your flag because now you're pushed up there. So let's say you're able to push in, you're able to capture the flag. Well, now the enemy team has a decision to make. Do they want to continue to try to push, and then you get into that stalemate scenario, and we'll talk about that in a second, or do you wrap backwards and try to stop the flag carrier there? And while this is happening, so you could wrap backwards through P3, you could come mid-map to P1, you could come water, you could come this area. So you have to make a decision as a team, where do we want to try to stop this? And all the while that is happening, say whoever's spawning, whoever this yellow team is spawning, they have to figure out what routes do they want to try to stop. So say there's like 1 or 2 people here, right? Well, they could easily say we have mid cut off. So they could get here, or in this scenario, you would probably go to this rock and you'd probably just watch mid right here. You could push up. If one person has a smoke, you could go ahead and you could smoke off this route. So then once you grab the flag, you can come through. And then now, if you're the other team, right, if you're the blue team, you push through. Let's say you're able to get a couple kills and you're able to also capture their flag, or at least get their flag. While you have their flag, now you have the top side of the map secured while the enemy has the bottom side of the map secured. So a lot of times what happens, and I know that there's a lot going on the screen right now, but a lot of times what happens is this team, so the blue team, is able to push forward, get a couple kills, they're able to capture or at least secure the flag. As they have the flag, they run it back to their base. Yellow team was also able to push up and they're able to grab the flag. Now they're able to come back and they have the flag in their base. So this becomes kind of a thing where blue was able to push forward and get the enemy team's flag. Yellow was able to push forward and get the blue team's flag. So now blue has yellow's flag back here and yellow has blue's flag back here. So now it comes down to kind of like a stalemate. Whoever's going to end up killing, so pushing that forward, let's say this yellow team has to push up one of these lanes here. They get kills. They get all the way inside of P5, but they're not able to secure this kill. Now they end up spawning back at their own base. That was kind of a thwarted attack, right? This, to me, is far more fun to watch than let's just try to capture A and B and see what happens from there. And that, what I just explained, is just one way to look at this, right? There are a million different ways that you could look at capture the flag. You could say, well, yellow pushes out over towards P3, is able to get the flag. Now they have the top side of the map while their teammates are catching these cutoffs right here and not allowing blue to leak out through mid or leak out through woods over here towards P4. So then you're not allowing them to get to your home base. And for me, that's the beauty of capture the flag. There's just so many different scenarios and it involves so much more communication and there's so much more strategy involved because, hey guys, so let's just run through this here. Let's say somebody from yellow is able to push up and grab the flag. All the while they're doing that, they're running back, they can say, all right, I'm at B-Dom, or I just passed P3, make sure you get mid-cut. So anybody coming up off of spawn, if you're in either of these locations, knows that they have to watch mid-map, or this person needs to cut through vents and get pipes, right? Because if your teammate is here, then you need to stop any blue attack through mid-map trying to stop them, or through pipes trying to stop them in office over here. So that, to me, is why I would love to watch capture the flag. There's so much more strategy, and I know that a lot of pros have said that it doesn't really play well in this game type, especially in 5v5, but we haven't really seen that at a top competitive level, right? We've seen it maybe like in a custom game or like a public match or something, but how many teams have actually spent a couple weeks learning capture the flag and how it plays and then dove into it? I feel like that's not the scenario, right? It's not a game type that's played currently in competitive, so teams aren't going to try to get really good at it because it just doesn't matter to them all that much at the moment. So in terms of our first topic here, is Dom being replaced? I don't know. We'll find out more in the future. Hopefully it is. Is it too late? Maybe we're like halfway through the season, so possibly it's too late, but I would love to see that place replaced with CTF or Control from last year. I know that game mode is not in our current game, but even Uplink. Remember back in Advanced Upware, we had Uplink. In Advanced Warfare, we had Uplink. You could throw the ball, you could dunk it. That was so exciting to watch, especially when somebody would throw and go to take the lead, and somebody would jump up and intercept it, and now they'd be going the other way. I competed in Advanced Warfare, so I played that game a lot, and I just remember how much fun that was to watch. So who knows? We'll stay on it. We'll see what ends up happening. But for now, we're going to go ahead. We're going to move on to our second list here, which is power rankings. So when it comes down to power rankings, we have a few things to talk about here. First thing I'll say is that my power rankings are probably or might be different than yours. And reason being is because I feel like there are 4 teams that basically have themselves solidified in an area, and all of the other 8 can basically be intermingled, especially since we've moved past LAN and now all of our events are online. You don't really know what you're going to get every week from every team. So to start this here, I'm going to reveal those 4 teams that I feel like I'm pretty confident in. First one being the team in first place, which is Dallas. I'm really comfortable with putting them there, coming off of multiple event wins. They did it on LAN, they did it online, they did it fairly convincingly. They're just really starting to come together. Both of their veterans with their ARs, with Crim and Clay, are playing really well. And the surprise for me, or the turning point for me when it comes to Dallas, is the fact that Illy and Shotzi are finally starting to come of age, right? I don't know. It's kind of a pun there, but they're definitely starting to pull their own weight. And everybody kind of knew that they had the ability to play that way, but would they play that way? So even though they won that last LAN event, I think it was CDL LA that they played at, I still want to see a little bit more from their young guns in actual tournament settings to say, you know what? They are up there with Atlanta. They are definitely in like that top bracket of teams. But for online, since they're all playing in the comfort of their own home, at their own setup, stuff like that, I feel super confident putting Dallas up there right now. We'll see what happens in the future, but we'll have to wait even a little bit longer because they're not at the next event. Moving on, the other team I feel really confident in at the top would be Atlanta. Now, either of these 2 top teams could probably be interchanged, right? The only reason why I have Dallas up there is because they won their last event. They're coming off of 2 events, and I feel like until they lose, they deserve to be there. So if I put Atlanta at 1 right now, I don't know if it would be deserving. It definitely wouldn't be deserving for Dallas to move down because the last event they won and they haven't played since then. So what have they done to be moved down? I don't feel like there's really anything to interchange them. But for now, those are the best 2 teams in the game, right? They have the least amount of question marks. When they go into a match, we know what to expect from those 2 teams. So that's what I feel at the top there. Moving on. Remember, I said I had 4 teams that I was pretty comfortable with. The other 2 teams are at the bottom. So when it comes to the other 2 teams, the bottom team, I just really feel like right now, LAG is definitely the worst team in our league. Not saying that they can't turn it around, but I feel like right now they're kind of towards the bottom in CDL points. They're really just not playing that well overall. They just haven't shown me anything, right? Whereas if you look at other teams that were on the bottom, like if you look back 3 weeks ago, Toronto was definitely on the bottom. They still had showed us something, right? To start the year, Toronto was really good, and we'll talk about them more in a second in terms of search and destroy. So they showed us something, but for LAG, with the roster overhaul that they made a few weeks, I guess it's probably a couple months ago now, it just really isn't paying off for them. I was kind of waiting to see if their young guns would come through and they would start playing better, but it just hasn't. Nothing has come of it, right? So we'll see if they're able to turn around. The other team that I haven't really seen anything from, which I'm a little bit surprised by because I was really high on these guys to start the year, is Paris. And a lot of people might think that this is too low for Paris, but as of late, they just really haven't been playing that well, right? I felt like after CDL London, I was like, okay, well, there's Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, and then after that, it might be the 2 EU teams, right? In that 4 and 5 slot, I was like, well, Paris and London looked really good, so I kind of had them in that 4 and 5 slot. Since then, we'll talk about the 4 and 5 slot after that, but Paris is just in a free-for-all. They really aren't winning any of their matches. They aren't looking impressive in those matches. They will have an opportunity to redeem themselves next weekend, but watching them play right now, I can't say, you know what, I think Paris deserves to be higher because they're doing this in their matches. That's just not happening. It's not existing right now. So we'll see what happens with them moving forward, but those are the 4 teams that I feel confident in. Now, from here, again, last time I did one of these power rankings, it was put on the Call of Duty competitive Reddit, and some people agreed, some people thought it was solid, some people thought that teams were out of control. I will say that moving forward, a lot of the rankings that I have for 3 through 10 are mainly based around what have you done for me lately, mixed with a little bit of how we started in terms of like where teams are at with their ranks. So I don't know if Chicago deserves to be at number 3, but I have them at number 3. And the biggest reason why I have them at number 3 is just because of how they're playing, or how they played at the beginning of the year. And as of like the last few days, they've looked pretty good in scrims. When you looked at like the first few days that General subbed in, they didn't really look that great. General, while he's really good at communication, was going like -6, -8, -10 every map. There was even one that I broke down. He commented on my video a couple of weeks ago where he went like double negative. And I feel like since then, especially over the last couple of days, I'll see like Envoy at the top at like 34 and 30 and Scump at like 32 and 31. Then I see General at like 30 and 34. So now all of a sudden I'm starting to see General up there. Obviously he's not slaying like Envoy because Envoy is a special talent, but he's getting up there. So the main reason why I have Chicago at 3 is because they're up really high on the leaderboards in terms of their CDL points, and the last few days they've been playing really well, so I feel like they deserve it. If somebody was to put Minnesota or New York or somebody else in their spot, that wouldn't bother me, right? Because I feel like Chicago still has stuff to prove right now. But for the time being, just with everything taken into consideration, I feel pretty comfortable with Chicago at 3. After that, again, this is a team that you could say, but they just got beat pretty handedly at their last event. But every time we've seen Minnesota outside of their last event, they've looked pretty strong, and I just feel comfortable putting them at 4. So even though at CDL Florida they didn't look good, they did beat Florida 3-0. So now that happened to be Florida's worst event also, so I don't know how much weight you could put into that. But I just, coming all the way up to CDL Florida, I thought Minnesota was definitely going to make the finals of CDL Florida. They've looked so good, whether it was on land or online. They're just that, I just keep referring to them as that team that's like the model of consistency. That's how I feel about them. They have all the pieces, right? They have the Slayers from AR position. They have the Slayers from the SMG position. They check all the boxes for me. They work really hard. They're the model of consistency. So that's why I have them at 4. We'll see what happens here in the next few weeks, because if they have another bad tournament, now it's probably time to start ranking them down a little bit. Same with Chicago, right? If either of those two teams have a bad tournament here in the next few weeks, then it's probably time to start moving them down our leaderboards a little bit. After that, we'll move right along. Now, with this, I feel like there are a few teams that I could put here, but at number 5, I have the New York Subliners. So for me, I really feel like New York belongs here because a lot of what they're doing, one, Mac Meltz has made all the difference in that team. Not only is he a pure slayer and he's bringing that envoy type of slaying power that they need, but I think he's making his other teammates feel a little bit more comfortable in Attach and Zuma and people like that. I just feel like they're playing more loose and they believe that they could win, and that's a big part of it. But they also got a 3-0 over Florida. They got a 3-0 over Minnesota at their last event. They've just been playing really well, and I'm super confident in them when it comes to respawns. Now, I believe they beat Atlanta in a search and destroy recently. I'm pretty positive. I didn't put that in my notes or anything, but I'm pretty positive. But I would like to see their search and destroy get a little bit better. We'll see if that ends up happening. I feel like if they can have another good tournament, then all of a sudden you might start saying, well, even though New York is really low in terms of the seeding, so the pro points right now, you might start thinking, are they the 4th best team? Are they the 3rd best team? What's going on here with New York? So that's a team that every tournament that they play, we're gaining a little bit more confidence in every time they play, and we'll see if they continue that as we move forward. After that, this is the only one that might be a little bit controversial. The only one that I have, well, I guess there could be more that's controversial, but I have Florida at number 6, and you might say, well, they just went 0-6 at their own home event, but if they're one event removed from a chip, I feel like you can't drop them too low. Everybody has bad weekends. Everybody has bad games. Maybe they just weren't feeling it. Maybe they just had a bad weekend. I mean, we don't really know. But 2 events ago to look as dominant as they did, and then last event, they just got smoked by every team they played, went home 0-2, see you later, thanks for showing up. I just don't want to drop them all the way down into oblivion, even though they just had a really bad tournament. So Florida, I have at 6. We'll see what happens, but they're another team that's kind of in limbo, right? If they end up getting 0-2 again in their next event, maybe they're moving down to 9-10. We'll see where it goes from there. After that, this is a team that has absolutely shot up the charts, and that is OGLA. I feel like at the last event, you're finally starting to see a difference in Optic Gaming LA. So the biggest thing for me is there's 2 players that are making all the difference here for me. And one is that Slasher looks like Slasher, right? He's absolutely slaying out. I think kill death wise, he was the best player at the last event. So Slasher looks absolutely insane. And then the biggest surprise for me is now all of a sudden Dashy has been transformed and he's playing super well at that SMG position. I know some maps he runs an AR, but when he's running an SMG, he's up there with the top slayers in the game. And I feel like that's another thing that they were missing, right? The teams that are playing really well and at the top of the leaderboards have the Simps, have the Abizis, have the Envoys, have the Illies, have the renewed Shotzies, and Optic didn't really have that. Even though they had Kenny, we expected Kenny to be there in the last matchup, in their last tournament. One of the matchups, I think it was the first matchup that they had on Friday, Kenny came out, had a 1.44 KD, led the entire day. And then the next one, he had like a 0.9 KD for their match. So I just feel like Kenny's a little bit inconsistent. So is TJ. But Chino gave them a little bit more than JCap, but he's not making the difference. I think the thing that's making the difference is Slasher is playing like a madman. Then Dashy has started to come to light, and he's really playing really well at that position. As we move on here to number 8, this is the team that absolutely has taken the biggest jump forward, at least in the last few weeks here, and that, if you haven't guessed it already, is Toronto. So I really feel like with the last performance, Toronto would come out and play. We'd be like, oh, when I did my predictions, my bracket predictions, I just kind of figured, you know what? Toronto might put up a fight, but they're not going to win. And then they won. And then the next match, I thought, you know what, Toronto's not really going to put up much of a fight. Maybe they'll win a map, but they're not going to win. And then they won. And Toronto just seems to be getting better and better. And as I said earlier in the show, this is a team that early on in the year was really good at search and destroy. And that's what kept them in a lot of matches. That's what still gave you a little bit of confidence in them. So I have Toronto at 8. And then last but not least, we have the 9 and 10 spot. And these are two teams that I just don't know what to do with because they look good and then they'll look bad. It's just super inconsistent in their performance. At number 9, I have London. Now, 2 months ago when we were still playing on LAN, I had, you know what, like the top 3 teams. And then I had London and Paris was still playing well. I had Minnesota and Florida. Those were like my 4, 5, 6, and 7 teams. And ever since then, London has just been, I don't know. They just like, they look really good in a lot of their respawn game modes, and then they'll come out and they'll just lay an egg. Or they were really dominant at Search and Destroy. Some people, Scraps, Wuskin on their team, have been playing out of their minds in Search and Destroy, but they'll drop maps, and then they'll end up losing, and then we all know what happened in the first map when they matched up in the last event. We won't talk about that, but they just seem to be one of those teams that's like they're just right on the brink, right? Sometimes they play really well, then they lay an egg, and then they end up losing the match. Whereas if they could just get more consistency there, they're a team that could easily be in the top 6. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Florida ended up falling out and London ended up moving in. That's kind of what we're getting right now from our online events, which puts Seattle at 10. Again, I don't know about Seattle. I've had them all the way up to like 7, but I don't know how impressive it is to gain victories over like LAG, right? They look like they're getting better. They look like they're getting closer, but right now I could see them probably even going down a little bit further because right in the middle of all this, even though their home event is coming, they've made another roster change. Enable is back in, Pander is out. How is that going to end up playing for the team? I mean, who knows? There's a lot of times, there's a lot of chemistry that goes into this. We'll see what Enable's able to bring to the table this time around, but I don't want to say that I'm not very confident, but I just want them to show me something, right? Like Toronto has been showing us something. OGLA absolutely has been showing us. New York, right? Those are teams that come out, win matches, are super dominant on some maps, and they still drop maps, but they're showing us stuff. Whereas Seattle hasn't really showed us much. Paris, LAG, those teams aren't really giving us much to be excited about. So that's kind of where we stand there. So those are my power rankings. In the comments below, let me know how you feel. And then one more topic here. We want to talk about who is the favorite leading into Seattle. So the only thing we're going to do is I am going to show my bracket here. And on the left-hand side, I know it's not very big, but these are the matchups. These are the 8 teams that will be there. So on day 1, we have, I'll just put these in place. We have Chicago versus Paris. We have Minnesota versus Optic. So that's Group A. Or maybe that's Group B. I'm not even sure which group is which. I just know these are the teams that are in it. We have London versus LAG. And then we have Seattle against New York. So if we're taking a look at this, now, one thing I'll say is that I always do a breakdown every day. So Friday morning, I upload a video predicting how I think Friday matches will go. Saturday morning, I upload a video predicting how I think Saturday matches will go. So make sure you come around for an in-depth look at this. But if I'm looking at this bracket, the first thing that sticks out to me is right here. Who's by far the best team in this group? It's by far New York, right? I think New York is going to end up walking through this group, and then it'll get a little bit tougher because my guess would be they'll be the winners out of Group B, which means they would play the losers from Group A. And if we look at Group A, we've got some pretty good teams over here, right? Chicago will probably win this matchup. And then this Rocker and OGLA. If OGLA on my power rankings wants to improve a little bit from, I think they're at 7 right now, and move up to 6 or 5 or even up to 4, this is a match that they need to win. And then if they move on and they beat Optic, they beat Optic. You can see where my mind's at. They beat Chicago. Now we're really talking about something with OGLA. So in terms of who I think the favorites are, I think that you would have to put New York up there. Will they be able to beat Chicago or Minnesota or OGLA if they meet up with them? Who knows? But I think you definitely have to put them up there. And then after that, I think the favorites out of Group A have to be, I can't even break these 3 teams down, right? I feel like if we're talking about who the top half of this tournament is, it's definitely Chicago, Minnesota, OGLA, and New York. I probably have the most confidence in New York right now. I could see Chicago turning it on. Again, General has been playing much better. He's been performing. He's been going even in the KD charts, and he brings a lot in terms of communication and knowing how to play the game. So we'll see what type of impact that has on their team chemistry. Then Minnesota didn't really look that great. OGLA did look great, even though they ended up losing 3-1 to Atlanta in the finals of the last event. I will say that if TJ wouldn't have choked that search and destroy that round 11 against FaZe, they go up 2-0. Who knows what ended up happening then? They could maybe have a chip under their belt. We don't really know, but OGLA has looked, again, really good. Minnesota does have to show us something. So if I had to say my top 3 favorites right now, I would probably say New York, Chicago, and OGLA just based off of the recent performances. But we'll see how it goes. I can't wait to watch this tournament. I want to see if London maybe surprises us, right? They're in a position in Group B where they could surprise us. Also, Seattle. I don't think they're going to beat New York, but they could easily make their way through the losers bracket and end up being the second team out. So Seattle and London definitely have to prove something on that side of the bracket. And then this matchup, I absolutely cannot wait for. This is, to me, this matchup carries the weight of like a semifinal match. And this is just a really interesting storyline here. Will Minnesota kind of return to their consistency that they've had all year? Will OGLA fizzle out a little bit? Will Chino play better? Will Kenny be the 1.44 Kenny? Will Kenny be the 1.0 Kenny? Who will show up in that matchup? I'm super excited. I cannot wait for that. So with that, guys, that is going to do it for this episode of Competitive Call of Duty Talk. So if you guys have any comments, make sure you put them down below. I'm super interested to hear what you guys have to say about this. This is the first time I've done a video that's more drawn out, a little bit longer. So please, in the comments, let me know how you're feeling about this. If you're new around here, this is the first time you've checked out one of my videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like before you head on the way. It really helps out the channel. And thank you guys so much. I will catch you in tomorrow's episode.